After tomorrow, Nathan won't need your advice anymore. Those were Carmen's exact words to me the night before my son's wedding. I'm Gerald Phillips, 58 years old, and I stayed home the next day. But by noon, that wedding had completely fallen apart, and the reason why left everyone stunned. The night before Nathan's wedding, I thought I was about to watch my boy start the best chapter of his life. After all, I'd raised him alone for 15 years since his mother passed from cancer when he was just 14. I'd worked double shifts as a police detective, then later as a private security consultant, making sure Nathan never felt like he was missing out on anything. Sarah's death hit us both hard, but we pulled through together. To me, his wedding wasn't just about him marrying the woman he claimed to love. It was proof that I'd done something right as a single father, that all those sacrifices had been worth it. At least that's what I told myself that Thursday evening. I stopped by the rehearsal dinner venue around 7:30 p.m. to drop off something I'd been working on for weeks. A photo album of Nathan's life, from Little League games where I coached his team after getting off late shifts, to his high school graduation where he made valedictorian despite everything we'd been through, to the day he started working at the law firm as a paralegal while studying for his bar exam at night. Every page represented another milestone we'd reached together. I wanted Carmen to see the kind of man she was marrying, the values we'd built together over the years through all the tough times. Carmen met me at the entrance of the Waterford Country Club, one of those fancy places in North Dallas that her parents had somehow managed to afford. She looked perfect as always, designer dress that probably cost more than I made in a week, professional makeup, the kind of woman who seemed like she belonged in magazines rather than in our working class world. But that night, her smile felt colder than usual, more calculated. "Gerald," she said, not even glancing at the photo album in my hands. I was hoping we could have a quick chat before things get too hectic in there. She led me to a quiet corner near the bar, away from the other guests who were already enjoying cocktails and appetizers. The place was all crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Gold-trimmed everything, the kind of venue that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. Through the windows, I could see Nathan laughing with his groomsmen on the patio, completely oblivious to what was about to happen. He looked so happy, so confident. I should have known right then that something was off. "Carmen, I brought this for you and Nathan," I said, holding out the album. "Thought you might like to look through it together tonight, maybe tomorrow morning before the ceremony. There are some great stories in here about his childhood, his achievements." She didn't even acknowledge it. Instead, she leaned in close, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. The kind of tone I'd heard criminals use when they thought they were being clever. "Gerald, I need you to understand something important. After tomorrow, Nathan won't need your advice anymore. He'll be my husband, part of my family, and honestly," she paused, the practiced smile never leaving her face, but her eyes went completely cold. "I think it's time you stepped back and let him grow up." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd been a cop for 25 years before retirement. I dealt with liars, manipulators, and criminals of every stripe. I'd interrogated murderers and con artists, faced down armed suspects and corrupt politicians. But hearing this from the woman my son was about to marry, it caught me completely off guard because I'd been trying so hard to give her the benefit of the doubt. "Excuse me? You've done your part, Gerald. You raised Nathan after Sarah died, and I'm sure that was challenging for someone in your position. But now he's moving into a different phase of his life, a more sophisticated phase. And frankly, your blue-collar background doesn't really fit with our future plans." I stood there holding that photo album, feeling like the ground had shifted under my feet. This wasn't grief talking, or wedding stress, or even the usual mother-in-law tension I'd heard about from other fathers. This was calculated. Cold, professional, even. Like she'd been planning this conversation for weeks. "Nathan loves you, of course," she continued, adjusting her designer bracelet, with the casual indifference of someone discussing the weather. "But love can make people hold on to things they've outgrown. I'm just trying to help him see that clearly. He's going to be a lawyer soon, Gerald. He'll need to associate with a certain class of people, attend certain events, make certain impressions, and having a retired cop for a father." She shrugged delicately. "Well, it's not exactly the image we're going for. I should have said something. Should have told her exactly what I thought about her sophisticated attitude and her casual dismissal of everything I'd sacrificed for Nathan. Instead, I felt all those years of raising Nathan alone pressing down on me. All those nights working late cases while helping him with homework at the kitchen table. All those times I'd put his needs before everything else in my life. Turning down promotions that would have taken me away from home, skipping social events because he had a baseball game or a school play. "Sleep in tomorrow, Gerald," she said, patting my shoulder like I was some old dog being put out to pasture. "Nathan and I will be just fine without you there. In fact, I think he'll appreciate having one less thing to worry about. Weddings can be so stressful, and having family dynamics to manage on top of everything else." Well, it's just unnecessary drama. She walked away then, back toward the party, where I could hear Nathan's voice carrying over the crowd, probably telling some story that was making everyone laugh. He had Sarah's gift for that, making people feel comfortable, bringing joy into a room. And this woman was about to take that away from him, reshape him into something that fit her idea of success. I don't remember walking to my truck. What I do remember is sitting in that country club parking lot for nearly an hour, staring at the photo album in my lap. My hands were shaking, not from age, but from pure anger mixed with something else. Fear, maybe. Fear that I was about to lose my son to someone who didn't really love him, who saw him as a project to be improved rather than a person to be cherished. That's when the cop in me finally kicked in. Something about this whole situation stank like a 3-day-old crime scene. Carmen's expensive tastes on a real estate agent's salary that couldn't possibly support them. Her family's sudden intense interest in Nathan once he started making real progress in law school and talking about his future earning potential. The way she'd been pushing him to take out bigger student loans for a more prestigious degree program, even though he was already doing well at the local university. The designer clothes, the fancy car, the constant talk about investments and opportunities that never seemed to materialize into actual income. I'd spent 25 years reading people, and Carmen Torres had been setting off my alarm bells from day one. The problem was, I hadn't wanted to see it because Nathan was happy, or at least he seemed happy. Looking back now, I realized that what I'd mistaken for happiness might have been something else entirely. Stress, maybe. The kind of tension that comes from constantly trying to live up to someone else's expectations. But sitting in that parking lot, listening to the sound of laughter and music drifting from the country club, I made a decision that would change everything. If Carmen wanted to play games, she was playing with the wrong guy. I might be retired from the force, but I still had every investigative instinct I'd ever developed. And if my son was walking into a trap, I was going to find out about it before it was too late. The drive home took me through the old neighborhood where Nathan and I had lived after Sarah died. Small houses with well-kept yards, the kind of place where neighbors knew each other's names and kids could ride their bikes safely down the street. Carmen had made it clear more than once that she considered it quaint in a way that wasn't really a compliment. She'd been pushing Nathan to move somewhere more upscale, somewhere that better reflected his professional status. Every time she said it, I wondered what was wrong with the values that had gotten him where he was in the first place. When I got home, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out my old case files, the ones I'd kept from my most memorable investigations. Not because I was nostalgic, but because I needed to remember how to think like a cop again, how to separate emotion from evidence, how to follow leads even when they led somewhere you didn't want to go. I started with what I knew. Carmen Torres, 27 years old, real estate agent with prestige properties. She'd been with Nathan for almost 2 years, and they'd been engaged for 6 months. She claimed to have grown up in Austin, but had moved to Dallas for better opportunities. Her parents, Paul and Maria Torres, owned what she called a consulting business that seemed to involve a lot of travel and very little actual consulting that anyone could define. The first red flag was her car, a BMW that was maybe 2 years old, with payments that should have been around $600 a month. On a real estate agent's commission in a market that had been slow for the past year, that car payment alone should have been a struggle. Then there were the clothes, the jewelry, the frequent expensive dinners at places Nathan and I could never have afforded on our combined income. When I'd asked Nathan about it once, he'd gotten defensive. Carmen's good at what she does, Dad. She works with high-end clients. But I'd checked the real estate records. In the past 18 months, Carmen Torres had closed exactly 3 sales. 3. That's maybe $15,000 in commission if she was lucky. And that's before taxes and agency fees. So where was the money coming from? I made myself a pot of coffee and settled in for a long night, because if there's one thing 25 years of police work teaches you, it's that when the surface doesn't match the reality, there's usually something rotten underneath. And I had a feeling that Carmen's surface was about as genuine as a $3 bill. The next morning came too fast. I'd been up until 3 a.m. making phone calls to old contacts, pulling in favors I'd been saving for years. By the time the sun came up, I had a list of phone numbers, email addresses, and the name of a private investigator who owed me a favor from a case we'd worked together back in 2018. I woke up at 6 a.m. to 3 text messages from Nathan. The first one said, "Dad, can't wait to see you today." The second was a photo of his tuxedo hanging in his hotel room with the caption, "Thanks for everything you've done for me." The third sent just 20 minutes earlier, said, "Love you, Dad. See you at the church." Each message felt like a knife twist. Here was my son, grateful and loving and completely oblivious to what was happening around him, while his bride-to-be had basically told me to disappear from his life. I stared at those messages for a long time, trying to decide what kind of father I wanted to be. The kind who stayed quiet to keep the peace, or the kind who fought for his kid even when that kid didn't know he needed fighting for. At 7 a.m., I called Carl Anderson. Carl had been my partner for 8 years before I moved to detective work, and after retirement, he'd started his own private investigation business. We'd stayed in touch, helped each other out when we could, and more importantly, we trusted each other completely. Carl, it's Gerald. I need a favor, and I need it fast. Morning to you too, Gerald. What's going on? My son's getting married in 6 hours. I think his fiancée and her family are running some kind of long con, and I need to know what I'm dealing with before he signs any papers. There was a pause on the other end of the line. In our business, you learn to recognize the difference between paranoid worry and legitimate concern. Carl knew I wasn't the type to panic over nothing. What do you need? Full background on the Torres family, Paul, Maria, and Carmen Torres. I'm sending you their information now. Carmen claims to be in real estate, but the numbers don't add up. I need to know where their money comes from, and I need to know if they've done this before. Done what before? Targeted young men with potential. Nathan's about to be a lawyer, Carl, and something tells me that's not a coincidence. How fast do you need this? Wedding starts at 11. I need whatever you can find by 9:30 at the latest. Carl was quiet for a moment, and I could almost hear him thinking through the logistics. That's tight, Gerald, but doable. I've got automated background search tools now that can pull together financial records, criminal history, marriage records, the works. Give me 2 hours. Carl, if I'm wrong about this, I'm going to feel like an idiot for the rest of my life. But if I'm right, then you're saving your kid from making the biggest mistake of his life. I'll call you back by 9:30. While I waited, I did what any father would do in that situation. I worried. I paced around my kitchen drinking coffee that tasted like battery acid and trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Nathan was a good kid, but he'd always been trusting, maybe too trusting. He believed the best in people, which made him an easy target for someone like Carmen if my suspicions were correct. At 8:45, my phone rang. It was Nathan. Dad, I was just calling to make sure you were up. You're never late for anything, but I wanted to check. I'm up, son. Getting ready now. Good. Hey, I just wanted to say thanks again for everything. I know it wasn't easy raising me alone after Mom died, and I know you made a lot of sacrifices. This day feels like, I don't know, like proof that we did okay. You know? I had to clear my throat before I could answer. We did more than okay, Nathan. We did great. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. More than you'll ever know. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the phone, hoping like hell that Carl was going to call back and tell me I was being paranoid. Because if I was right about Carmen, I was about to break my son's heart, and if I was wrong, I might lose him forever. At exactly 9:30 a.m., my phone rang. Carl's name showed up on the caller ID, and I answered before the first ring finished. Gerald, you need to sit down. I'm already sitting. What did you find? Carl's voice was grim. The tone he used to use when we'd just cracked a case that was worse than we'd expected. Your instincts were right. Paul Torres has filed bankruptcy twice in the last 8 years. Multiple failed business ventures, defaulted loans, tax liens going back to 2019. The consulting business is a shell company with no actual revenue. They're living on credit cards and whatever schemes they can run. My stomach dropped. What about Carmen? That's where it gets interesting. Carmen Torres has been engaged 4 times in the last 6 years, Gerald. 4 times. Always to guys with stable careers or family money. 2 engineers, 1 accountant, and a guy whose family owned a construction business. All 4 engagements ended abruptly after she gained access to their financial information. The room started spinning. Are you absolutely sure about this? Dead sure. I found social media posts going back years. She follows a pattern, meets successful young men, love bombs them for 6 to 8 months, gets engaged, starts pushing for joint bank accounts and shared investments, then disappears when they either catch on or run out of accessible money. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. There's more, isn't there? Yeah, I found photos from 3 weeks ago. Carmen at the Marriott in Austin with some guy who's definitely not your son. Multiple angles, multiple times of day. She spent the weekend there while telling Nathan she was at a real estate conference. Send me everything. Already did. Check your email. Gerald, there's one more thing. I dug deeper into the Torres family finances. They owe money to some very unfriendly people, the kind who don't just send collection letters. Carmen isn't just looking for a meal ticket. She's looking for a way to stay alive. I hung up and opened my email. Photo after photo of Carmen wrapped around some guy in expensive clothes, laughing at hotel bars, walking hand in hand through Austin's downtown district. The timestamps showed it was exactly 3 weeks ago, right after Nathan had given her his grandmother's engagement ring. But the financial records were what really made me sick. Bank statements showing the Torres family was nearly $200,000 in debt to various creditors, including some names that Carl had highlighted in red with a note. Loan sharks. These guys play for keeps. Then I saw the prenuptial agreement that Carmen's family had insisted Nathan sign. I'd managed to get a copy through one of my contacts at Nathan's law firm. The document was 47 pages long, filled with legal language that would make most people's eyes glaze over. But I'd had a lawyer friend review it overnight, and what he'd found made my blood run cold. Clause 14, subsection 3. In the event of divorce within the first 5 years of marriage, 60% of the husband's future earnings shall be transferred to accounts designated by the wife's family for investment purposes. Clause 22. Any inheritance, life insurance, or family assets belonging to the husband shall be considered marital property subject to division. Clause 31. The husband agrees to co-sign all investment opportunities presented by the wife's family business consultants. They weren't just marrying Nathan. They were planning to strip mine his entire financial future to pay off their debts. And if the marriage lasted long enough, they'd have access to everything. My pension, the house Sarah and I had bought together, even the $50,000 life insurance policy I carried with Nathan as the beneficiary. I looked at the clock. 10:15 a.m. The ceremony started at 11 a.m. I called Nathan's cell phone directly. Dad, where are you? Everyone's asking, and Carmen's parents keep looking around like they're expecting you to show up. Nathan, I need you to meet me in the parking lot behind the church. Right now, there's something you need to see before you walk down that aisle. Dad, I can't leave. The ceremony starts in 45 minutes, and I still need to get my boutonniere pinned on, and the photographer wants to take some pre-ceremony shots. Son, I use the voice I'd learned in 25 years of police work. The one that cut through panic and confusion and got people's attention. This is the most important conversation we will ever have. Give me 10 minutes. If what I show you doesn't change anything, I'll drive away and never mention it again. But if you don't hear me out now, you might regret it for the rest of your life. The desperation in my voice must have gotten through to him because after a pause, he said, okay, 10 minutes. But Dad, this better be important. More important than you know. I drove to the church with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. St. Mary's Catholic Church was in the heart of old Dallas, surrounded by oak trees that were older than the city itself. Cars were already filling the parking lot, family, friends, colleagues from Nathan's law firm. People who cared about him, who wanted to see him happy. People who had no idea they were about to witness either a wedding or a disaster. I parked behind the church near the old cemetery, away from the main entrance where guests were still arriving. Nathan appeared 5 minutes later, still in his tuxedo, but looking more confused than angry. He was tall like his mother had been, with her same quick smile and trusting eyes. Looking at him, I could see exactly why Carmen had targeted him. He radiated the kind of decency and stability that predators could smell from miles away. Dad, what's going on? Everyone's worried about you. I handed him my phone with Carl's investigation pulled up. Start with the photos. Nathan's face went white as he scrolled through them. Carmen wrapped around another man at the Marriott, kissing him in the hotel lobby, walking hand in hand through downtown Austin. The timestamps clearly showed it was 3 weeks ago, right around the time she'd been telling Nathan she needed space to focus on wedding planning. Dad, what is this? That's not all, son. I showed him the financial records, the bankruptcy filings, the pattern of broken engagements. She's done this before, multiple times. You're not her first target, and if this goes through, you won't be her last. Nathan sank down onto a bench that sat under one of the old oak trees, his head in his hands. I don't understand. She said she loved me. I know, Nathan. But look at this. I pulled out the prenuptial agreement and pointed to the clauses my lawyer friend had highlighted. This isn't a marriage contract. It's a financial takeover. If you sign this and marry her, they'll have legal access to everything you earn for the next 5 years. Your salary, any bonuses, even my assets if something happens to me. He read through the document slowly, and I watched his face change as the reality sank in. The naive trust was being replaced by something harder, more mature. For the first time in 2 years, he looked like the man I'd raised instead of the boy Carmen had been manipulating. How long have you known about this? I had suspicions for months, but I got the proof this morning. I've been up all night making calls, pulling in favors, trying to get to the truth before it was too late. Nathan looked toward the church where 150 guests were waiting for him to show up and marry a woman who was planning to financially destroy him. What do I do, Dad? You do what your mother would have wanted. You choose truth over convenience. You choose honor over embarrassment. Nathan stood up, straightening his shoulders. He took the phone from my hands and scrolled through the photos again, his jaw getting tighter with each image. She was with him while I was working double shifts to pay for this wedding. I'm sorry, son. I'm so sorry you have to go through this. He looked at me with something I hadn't seen in his eyes for a long time. Respect. Trust. The kind of bond we'd had before Carmen had started working to drive a wedge between us. Dad, will you come with me? Where? Inside. I need to end this, and I don't want to do it alone. I put my arm around his shoulders. Son, I've been waiting 2 years for you to ask. We walked into St. Mary's together, father and son, both of us knowing that the next 10 minutes would change everything. The church was packed with 150 guests, all dressed in their Sunday best, checking their watches and whispering about why the ceremony was running late. Carmen stood at the altar in a dress that probably cost more than Nathan's monthly salary, her smile starting to crack around the edges as she saw us approaching from the back of the church. Nathan walked halfway down the aisle, then stopped. The church went dead silent, the kind of quiet that happens when people sense something dramatic is about to unfold. Ladies and gentlemen, Nathan said, his voice carrying clearly through the sanctuary, there's not going to be a wedding today. Gasps echoed through the church. Carmen's face went from confusion to fury in about 2 seconds, but she was too far away to stop what was happening. I've discovered that the woman I was about to marry has been lying to me about everything that matters, Nathan continued, and I mean everything. He pulled out his phone and held it up so the front rows could see the screen. 3 weeks ago, while I was working double shifts to pay for this wedding, Carmen was in Austin with another man. Multiple photos, multiple days, the church erupted. Carmen's mother started screaming about lies and misunderstandings. Her father jumped up from the front pew, pointing fingers and making threats about lawsuits and defamation. But Nathan just stood there, calm and steady, while chaos broke out around him. Carmen tried to rush toward him, her expensive heels clicking on the marble floor, but Nathan held up his hand. Don't, he said quietly. Just don't. Nathan, you don't understand, Carmen called out, her voice shaking with what might have been real emotion for the first time in 2 years. Those photos aren't what they look like. That man is a client, a business associate. I can explain everything. Nathan looked at her for a long moment, and I saw something in his eyes that reminded me of his mother. Sarah had the same expression when she was disappointed in someone, not angry, just sad that they thought she was stupid enough to believe their lies. Carmen, I've seen your bank records. I've seen your family's debt. I've seen the prenup your father wrote up. He pulled out the contract and held it up. 60% of my future earnings? Really? Did you think I was too dumb to eventually read the fine print? Paul Torres was on his feet now, red-faced and shouting. You can't prove anything, you little punk. That's confidential financial information. Actually, Nathan said, his voice taking on the professional tone he'd learned in law school, it's all public record. Bankruptcy filings, court judgments, tax liens. Amazing what you can find when you know where to look. I felt a surge of pride watching him handle the situation. This was the man I'd raised, not the confused boy Carmen had been manipulating for 2 years. Carmen's family tried everything in those next few minutes. Tears, threats, promises to change, accusations that I had poisoned Nathan against them. Paul Torres even tried to physically intimidate Nathan, stepping into the aisle like he was going to start something. But I moved up beside my son, and something about my expression made Paul think better of it. 25 years as a cop gives you a certain look that smart people don't mess with. This is what's going to happen, Nathan announced to the church. Everyone who wants to stay for a reception can head over to the community center. There's already food and music paid for, might as well not waste it. But there won't be a bride and groom there, and there definitely won't be a Torres family. Carmen made one last desperate attempt, grabbing Nathan's arm as he turned to leave. Nathan, please, I love you. I made mistakes, but I love you. Nathan looked down at her hand on his arm, then gently removed it. Carmen, you don't love me, you don't even know me. You love what you thought you could take from me. By noon, the church was empty except for Nathan and me. We sat in the front pew, both of us still in our formal clothes, looking at the altar where Carmen should have been standing. The flowers were beautiful. White roses and baby's breath, the kind of arrangement Sarah would have loved. It seemed wrong to let them go to waste. Dad? Yeah, son? Thank you for having my back when I was too stupid to see what was happening. I put my arm around his shoulders, something I hadn't done since he was a teenager. That's what fathers do, Nathan. We protect our kids even when they don't want to be protected. I really thought I was going to marry her, but you didn't, and that's what matters. Nathan was quiet for a minute, then said, you know what the worst part is? She almost made me believe that you were the problem, that you were holding me back from becoming the man I was supposed to be. She's good at what she does, son. That's what makes people like her dangerous. They find your weak spots and exploit them. How did you know to investigate her? I smiled. 25 years as a cop, Nathan. When someone tells me I'm not needed anymore, that usually means I'm needed more than ever. Plus, she made one critical mistake. What's that? She underestimated how much I love you. We sat there for a while longer, father and son, in an empty church that should have been full of celebration. But honestly, it felt more like a victory than a defeat. Because sometimes the best weddings are the ones that don't happen. Carmen and her family tried to cause trouble afterward, just like I'd expected, threatened lawsuits for emotional damages and breach of contract. But when Carl delivered copies of all our evidence to their lawyer, those threats disappeared pretty quickly. Turns out fraud is harder to defend than hurt feelings, and most lawyers won't take a case they know they'll lose. Nathan threw himself into his law studies after that, more determined than ever to build a career on his own terms. He passed the bar exam 6 months later on his first try. At his celebration dinner, he raised his beer and said to Dad, who taught me that the people who love you most are sometimes the ones who tell you what you don't want to hear. I raised my own beer to having each other's backs no matter what. The truth is, Carmen Torres did me a favor that night at the country club. She showed me that Nathan wasn't just my son, he was my partner, my family. And nobody, no matter how pretty or sophisticated they think they are, gets to break up our team. Some people might say I overreacted, that I should have let Nathan make his own mistakes. But when you've spent your whole life protecting people, you don't stop when it comes to your own kid. You use every skill you have, every contact you've made, every instinct you've developed to keep them safe. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you save the person you love most from making the biggest mistake of their life. Carmen Torres wanted to cut me out of Nathan's future. Instead, she guaranteed I'd be part of it forever. Because now Nathan knows what real loyalty looks like and what fake love costs. That's the difference between family and everyone else. Family doesn't walk away when things get complicated. Family shows up with evidence, backup, and a plan.